okay? So this is our flexibility. This isn't even the mobility part yet. What I wanna see, well, keeping this knee down, can you actually raise and lift this foot off the ground?
Whew. Definitely challenging to do
tough,
so.
Right?
Yeah.
That's the active part of using that hip. What's going on, man?
What's up, Kyle?
How you doing?
Good to see you. You too.
You ready?
Let's do it.
What are we doing?
Let's see some mobility.
Mobility.
Let's get in it.
I think I'm okay at that, so let's do it.
Today we're here with Dr. Kyle Richmond, the mobility expert, and we're gonna go through some mobility for runners.
All right, guys, I'm Dr. Kyle Richmond. I'm here with Rebuilt Strength and Rehab. Chase came on down. He said, hey, you know, I'm a runner and I need a lot of mobility, so we're gonna come up with a few maybe routines or just some big things that I see that runners need when it comes to mobility.
So something common we see a lot with runners is something that gets pushed to the side is mobility work. And today we're gonna focus on some movements that runners could use to help improve their mobility, help them move better, help them feel better, and help avoid injury. So the first one we're gonna get into is gonna be one for the hips.
All right, guys, so the biggest things that I see when it comes to runners and mobility, there's a few areas they really lack. Biggest one is hip internal rotation. The second one, knee rotation. The last one, ankle dorsiflexion. So I'm gonna give you my 3 biggest mobility drills for all those areas.
Good.
All right,
Yeah, I like
all right.
it.
So let's go into 90-90 then. I think your biggest thing is we're gonna put you into whatever leg you wanna be first, but I want you to be in 90-90. So front leg, 90 degrees, back leg, 90 degrees. So these knees, boom, and boom, okay? So hand here, hand here. Where do you feel this sensation? Because the thing we're gonna focus on is your back hip.
That's where I feel right now.
You should feel on that outside hip, okay?
Perfect.
Our goal, well, we notice a lot of people, they're really good at bringing themselves into external rotation, pigeon stretch. We always do this before we run, right? Internal rotation is the other way. It's bringing my foot outside of my hip. That's where we're focusing on your back leg. So I'm gonna actually have you take this arm, rotate, and now we're gonna sink down into that stretch. You should feel that out here, okay? A lot of people can't even get to that. They're gonna be so sitting up right here where they can't even get into that stretch. So first is you just getting into here, okay? So this is our flexibility. This isn't even the mobility part yet. Mobility means we have to have something active. There needs to be a strength component, a control component to that, okay? So let's bring you actually back to here. What I wanna see, well, keeping this knee down, can you actually raise and lift this foot off the ground? Whew.
Definitely challenging
That's
to do
tough,
so.
right?
Yeah.
That's the active part of using that hip. It doesn't want to move, does it?
No.
Okay, so for those of you guys struggle with getting into this position, let alone lifting the foot here, I want you to drop to your left elbow. Now from here, can you pick this foot up off the ground? A little easier, still challenging, but for those that can't even get any motion, this is where we start. Now when you're doing mobility training, I want it to be same principles as strength training. You shouldn't just be able to do 20 easy reps, blah, blah, blah. Gotta make it challenging. So get yourself a little higher up again on your hand, and let's just do a few really challenging reps here. Use all of this tissue here. Good. Feel like you might want to cramp here, huh?
Yeah, I definitely feel it starting to cramp.
It's okay. Good. And relax a second. If you look though, Chase has a lot of passive motion. This is your flexibility. Look at all the stuff that you can't control. You can only get your foot up to here. Now let's have you try to hold. Ready? Let go. Ready? I'm gonna let go. Hold, hold, hold. There it is, relax. So that's what I look at too with a lot of my runners is they're flexible. They stretch all day long. Look at that. How much can you actually use then? That's your mobility. Go for it again. Pick it up. There we go. We're starting to build that connection back because look how much space you have here now.
Yeah,
All
wow.
of a sudden your body's starting to understand that's usable, usable tissue. Good, relax. Let's try the other side. That's your stretch first, right? You feel probably in that outside hip.
This one I feel like I'm struggling to feel as much.
Yeah.
There
Okay.
we go. Now we're starting to feel it.
There we go. So that's flexibility. Most people do, they'll hang out in a stretch, okay, and then they go, I'm ready to go. Well, I want to see your active control now. So you can all square your shoulders off a little bit. Keep this thing down. I want you to drive from that ankle. Good. Yeah, you got a good amount. But do you see what happens with your back when I start to move your hip?
Starts to move along.
Starts to move along with it. So that's another reason why we want to disassociate the hip from your low back. This is important. So now when you go to lift, try to keep yourself here. Yeah. Feel a difference?
Definitely a lot harder.
That's
Yeah,
where a
much
lot of
easier to
people,
move up.
they buy motion there.
Yeah.
I'm going to keep you here. Now go ahead and lift.
So how often would you recommend to do something like this?
I would do a couple sets every few days.
Every few days.
You think about like strength training, right? You don't need to do it every single day, but it should be challenging enough where you don't want to do it every day.
Sure.
People don't go in the gym and do curls every day. They do it every few days or twice a week. But you shouldn't with mobility training just come in and say, hey, I'm going to do 50 of these. You should get to like 10, 12 reps and be like, I need to take a break.
Yeah.
So for some runners that aren't like Chase, they might be like, wow, that's super easy. What I do is I put them up on a block and say, now go ahead and try to lift.
Yeah, it's tough not moving the back too.
Yeah. So it's a little different. I can bring you more towards your end range, but 8 to 10 of these is going to be a lot more challenging than, say, 20 of these down here. Cool. So that's the biggest one I use for hips. Most often, it's internal rotation that people lack, especially in runners, because how often do you get in that position when you run?
Not too often.
Never. Your hips are usually, they're good at stabilizing running, but they're not great at moving into rotation, and that's the building block of a hip is rotation.
Yeah, 100%. I like it.
Cool.
Sweet.
So next biggest thing is knee mobility. A lot of people do like knees over toe stuff, or they'll stretch their quads more, they'll do the couch stretch. What a lot of people don't know, very similar to the hips, the knee have a rotational capacity to them. So they need to externally rotate, internally rotate. What a lot of runners lack is rotation here, and then they feel the effects upstream and downstream. So they'll feel it in the ankle, they'll feel it in the hip, because they don't have a lot of movement here, okay? So first we're gonna see if you could even move there, and then we'll use the resistance band to actually load it up, make it a little more challenging.
Let's do it.
So first thing you're gonna do, pick those toes up. Let's just work on one heel, one at a time here. So what you're gonna do is use that ankle to help you rotate out. You should feel that shin bone moving. Rotate in. So rotate out, rotate in. I want you to go all the way in. That's pretty tough, isn't it?
Ends up
Going in, a lot of people, you're gonna have more, which is called external rotation here. You get more here, what happens when we go in?
Definitely a lot harder.
tough.
Yeah.
And you'll feel, a lot of runners will feel this on their shins. So a lot of people that get some like shin irritation or shin issues,
Yeah.
usually they have weak shins and then they don't have the ability to rotate their shins. So this is another way to also help strengthen stuff for shin splints, which is really
Sweet.
common. It's the inability to move the knee. Let's try the same thing here real quick. See what we got on this side. Yeah, great job there. If you hold the hip here,
Yeah.
another common thing I see is people take their whole hip to move like this.
Move with it.
They go, oh, look, I'm getting motion here. You keep this, the femur bone, in place, and that knee rotates back and forth. You ever had history of knee issues? Now, if you have a mini band, this is the best way to load it. We're gonna loop it on both feet here. Now you can take one at a time, go ahead and load that up.
Ooh, yeah, that's a lot harder.
Feel outside your shin. Some people might get discomfort outside the knee. As long as you're feeling it somewhere on this outside, I'm okay with it. You might also get a little bit of a stretch here.
Yeah.
So with the band this way, this one's geared more towards external rotation. I notice a lot of people lack internal, so coming in is a lot harder.
Gotcha.
A lot of people tend to walk with their feet more turned out, do a lot of stuff here, but also they don't load this. How often have you loaded the knee joint in terms of strength training?
Yeah, I've never done it banded, so that's good. Good tool to mix in to make it harder.
And mobility training is strength training. A lot of people don't realize that. A lot of people confuse it and say, oh, I'm doing mobility training, I'm just gonna hold a stretch. That's flexibility. And what we noticed earlier at your hip, you've got flexibility. This is the mobility that most of my runners are missing. I'll show you, hey, well, here's a, funny you did that, because what I also have people do, squeeze this between your knees.
And that takes the hip out of it.
Takes the hip, because you can't move that now, or else you'll lose this. So it might be a little bit of a setup for people, but this isolates the knee better than anything else. I just put a light band on you, but for a lot of people, you can go a medium band, a heavy band, and getting really tough rotational work. A lot of my non-contact injuries I see is a lack of tibial rotation, ACL, MCL.
Yeah.
It's a plant, rotate, that's not ready for it, stuff goes wrong.
Would it be okay if you haven't done any mobility training to jump in with the band, or should you start off?
I would make sure you can move there first,
Build up to it.
because if you don't have the actual mobility, right? Let's say we take this off and go ahead and step out of that. If Chase doesn't even have the ability to rotate his shin, well, it doesn't make sense to load it up with any sort of weight. If you literally come here and you're like, I have no motion, there's other things we can do to increase that, but this is a good start to just learn the control.
Sweet.
And then we add something like
band.
this.
Sweet.
Yep, okay, so hip, knee, let's do some for ankles.
Yeah, let's do it. Let's run. Perfect.
All right, so last thing I always see in a lot of my runners is a lack of ankle mobility, just in general. So we're gonna teach you a CAR. A CAR stands for controlled articular rotation. It's a joint circle, okay? The difference with this versus the knee, now we're gonna make sure the shin doesn't move. So I want you to do is hug that leg up towards you. Your hands are on your shin to make sure this doesn't rotate now back and forth. Our goal is only the ankle. So you're gonna make as big of a circle as you can with the ankle without this moving, and it's gonna be slow and controlled. So I want slow or even slower. Big of a circle as you can, and what you're gonna see, at certain points, see that skipping and that shakiness?
Yeah.
That's your brain learning how to control that. It doesn't understand, because I want you to go even slower. Let's pop this off, watch this. Even slower, slow as you can go. we're going to expose, because there's certain parts you want to speed up. This bottom part your brain does not like to control.
no.
So slow here, slow. There we go.
This might be it's a common question I hear a lot. And I noticed with myself, my ankles tend to crack a lot. What does that mean with like doing a drill like this? Like, is it bad that it's cracking? Is it good? Does it not really matter?
I'd like to say it depends. Most often than not, cracking a joint doesn't matter. Okay. We see it a lot in people who, my soccer players, basketball players, runners, their joints are more cracky because they usually don't have the ability to move them very well. Those ligaments and tendons are kind of rubbing over each other and causing that crack.
Sure.
The only time it's a real issue is if it hurts during it.
Okay,
Oh man,
cool.
pop, that hurts. But it also means we probably need more control here, because look at your circle tends to get a lot smaller and a lot less controlled, and you'll feel more cracks when you go a little bit bigger, but over time, that'll help.
Oh, sweet.
You will feel the shins working, you'll feel the calf, you'll feel the little intrinsic muscles of the feet. Go the other direction now. So when we're doing cars, I want both directions, because you're gonna find certain areas of that big circle, there's not a lot of control. Now these are easy ways just to train the shins for most of your runners.
Yeah.
Yes, they take a lot of load during running, but they don't train them in terms of strength. You know, yes, people do wall, tib raises and stuff like that, but this is a little more dynamic because you're getting all these different areas of control.
And now these drills that we're going over, is there a certain time of day that'd be good for them? Should you do in the morning, before a run, after a run?
Yeah, great question. Cars, you can do them all day long. Slow down. Look at what happens when you start getting distracted. You want to speed it up. Let that go slow. So cars all day long. You cannot overdo this. This is like a skill. It's teaching your body how to move. I love cars as a warm-up. All the other drills we did, you can do them before, you can do them after. What I tell people when you're first starting mobility training, do it on a separate session than you're running, because it's going to fatigue you a little more. Your running might get a little affected. As you get better, you can use these as a warm-up, you can use them as a cool-down. It really depends on your goal, right? If your goal is to get stronger, would you go and lift a heavy back squat right before you go to run?
Yeah, that's a good point.
So it's kind of the same idea.
So say like if you had a race, you might want to avoid doing it the day of a race.
If you haven't done them before.
haven't done them,
Yeah,
yeah.
this is not like, hey, I have my 200-mile run. I'm going to do all this stuff, because guess what? What's tired right now?
Yeah,
Your
it
shins, and
definitely
now you
feels
go into a
shins
long
also.
run.
Yeah.
It's a little different.
That makes sense.
All right, go ahead and relax.
All right, so one was, how do you reduce pain in the knees and ankles when running?
Again, now this comes down to why an assessment's so important. A lot of people just go and they'll pull up a bunch of videos online and they try 100 different things. Does your knee not rotate? Does your knee not extend? Does your knee not bend? I think the biggest thing that comes for runners is you can take the general approach by adding mobility, but go and get assessed by somebody, because you'll save yourself so many problems. When it comes to pain, now if it's just stiffness, you could probably throw mobility and feel a lot better. When it's pain, a lot of people try to treat it with like one thing, and then another thing, and then another thing. So I would recommend, hey, get an assessment from somebody, which there's a lot of great people that can do it virtually. They can do it, in person, but that helps a ton. I tell a lot of people with knee and hip issues, get your spine assessed. We see referral issues from the low back into the lower joints here, especially the kneecap. A lot of this kneecap stuff I see as a referral from the low back. You'd be amazed with how many of that stuff goes away from the right low back treatment.
And how to know whether you need inserts, insoles to prevent injury or pain?
Okay, so big thing on insoles, they're not guaranteed to prevent injury or pain. There's a lot of things that it's hard to say, hey, this will prevent it. If you're using insoles to treat your pain, I would look at, again, an assessment, make sure, do you move well in the ankle? Do you move well in your toes? Do you move well in your shin, your knee? If you've got all the mobility and you move so great and you're super strong, then we can go insoles. But people put the cart before the horse. They go insoles first and they go, well, it didn't fix anything. Well, guess what? You still don't have shin rotation. You still don't have ankle mobility. I would address that before anything.
Best strength training exercises for runners?
Best strength training. What would you say to that?
I would say single leg stuff is good because running is a single leg sport.
Yep.
A lot of like anti-rotation core work, because when you're running, the more you could keep your torso locked in place, the more efficient you'll be.
Yep.
Lateral movements too.
Yeah, lateral.
Running's very sagittal.
Yeah.
Lateral stuff, and that's where mobility tends to help a lot, because again, if we're running, our knees are doing this, they don't usually do this. Our hips are doing this, they don't usually do rotation. So it's just adding in more movements that help offload the tissues that are constantly worked.
Yeah.
That's, I think, the biggest thing for people.
Yeah.
You don't need to get stronger hip flexors, maybe because you're using your hip flexors so many times you're running. Maybe you need more rotation in the hip.
Yeah, that's
So,
good.
way to look at it.
And you can't go wrong too with like strengthening your feet. You could even take like simple exercises and crank them up a notch by focusing more on what your foot is doing on the exercise. So take like a squat or an RDL instead of just keeping your weight in the midfoot, focus on actually using that big toe, driving the ground, which will cue your glutes to fire, which is just a good way to elevate your movements and help make it more of like an athlete-specific type movement.
And then to tighten all this, you can say, hey, a lot of people go, I need more mobility, but they just stretch.
Yeah.
I'm going to stretch my hamstring instead of getting stronger. And if we think of mobility as strength training, that'll make more sense to people versus saying, oh, mobility is just stretching. I get that all the time. Why do I have shin splints? So there's two reasons. Sometimes you're actually weak there, right? If I do the test, like they can't actually pick up into dorsiflexion. That's not always the case though. Sometimes because the knee doesn't move well and the ankle doesn't move well. So if you look at that person, you make them do an ankle car and they're like super shaky and they're all over the place. Well, there's not a lot of control in the shin, in the ankle, and their knees too. If you look at it and they're like, oh, I have no rotation here. Well, those muscles that are responsible for moving the knee, ankle, and the shin aren't really moving that well. So we have to increase the ability to do that stuff. So yeah, a lot of these things are like, well, it depends, but you have to make sure you have the range of motion in your ankle, have the range of motion in your knee, and then you can do all the shin exercises you want as long as those two move well.
Sweet.
It's like putting a Band-Aid over it, right?
Yeah.
Oh, I have shin splints, I'm just gonna do more shin exercises.
Yeah.
Not always, it depends.
Well, thanks again, Kyle.
You got it,
Appreciate
man.
it. Yeah.
Appreciate you coming out.
Thanks for all the help and all the tips. I'm sure like a lot of people will benefit from a lot of things we went over today.
I hope so, that's the goal.
Heck yeah.
If you guys are looking for more mobility programs or maybe something a little more specific, I have a few options. I've got programs, one specifically for runners that hits ankles, knees, hips, all the stuff we just did today. I also have one-on-one coaching. If you have maybe a certain pain point that you need addressed, I offer stuff virtually, so be sure to check that out. Or shoot me a message directly. I'm always happy to help and kind of put you where you need to be.
Really feeling good, feeling refreshed after today, but stay tuned for more running content coming your way.